Hello. Welcome to another exciting and thrilling episode of a Game Guru live Twitch broadcast. My name is Lee Bamba, and I'm going to spend the next 30 to 60 minutes waffling about whatever you would like to talk about. So, I have two plans. The first plan is that there is nothing that you have requested that I include in this broadcast. Then I shall go to do an overview of the 1.131 update that is scheduled to be released this week. There's just a few little bugs that I'd like to deal with before I release, and hopefully it was going to go out today, but I really want to just do some little tweakings to some of the new visual effects that have gone in, so I just want to tweak those, so hopefully tomorrow. And I can give you a rundown right now if the suggestion board is completely empty. So we're going to go straight in to the forums. If you don't know how to recommend a subject for these broadcasts, just go to the Game Guru forum, go into product chat, look for Twitch sessions, go to the very end, and then you can make a post, request, idea, and let other people debate whether it is or isn't a good idea. So with the last thing, because I did click in a little bit earlier, but I only skimmed through, so I've lost my thread. But it looks like that's the last one, the 5th of May, so it's this one, the 13th of May. I would like to see a session covering the slider settings again. Dynamic lights versus bait lighting, performance differences. Saving a level slider settings, all the light and fog, so that they can be copied, pasted into the next level or into day-night trigger zone. Yeah, those are good subjects. How to go up with different custom sliders from a trigger zone. Different custom slider settings. Yeah, there are a few commands that'll let you do that. We can show you how to do that. And I never miss catching up on the Twitch streams later when I get home from work. It's been a great series so far, and shall continue to be great. Oh yes. So that's a great suggestion. It has been covered before, but we've added sliders since and commands since, and it's a good refresher, and then we may be able to talk about different things as well. Here's another post. Is this the last? Yeah, this is the last post of the suggestions, requests, ideas. My question for the next broadcast is regarding global illumination. When will my soulless test levels go from looking like the above in the attached shot to the one below, particularly leading in on from the SAO broadcast last week, and the two systems are linked? Well, I'm imagining that when will it look like the one below? Well, it already looks like the one below, doesn't it? I mean, it's already there. It's got the little graphic, so that's been rendered somehow. So let's just reread it again, just so I'm really understanding it. For the next broadcast regarding globalization, when will my test levels go from looking the one above to the one below? When you do whatever it is that you did to create that screenshot below. So it's, I guess the answer is it's already available. Look at screenshot number 2. So maybe if you're joining us, this is a live broadcast, so people can chat and post questions live, and I can read it in a separate window. So if you're the person responsible for this thread post, then maybe clarify that in the chat window. Also, how about creating us a cube map environment shader for making things shiny? I found about 50 shaders on the internet, all of which work excellently on my shader editing program, but once in GG, make the entity show as black. I must be missing something fundamental. Yeah, the shaders in Game Guru are pretty much fixed. We've created shaders for character animations, for static entities, for shaders used when you're using the light mapper data, for grass, for skies, force processing. All those shaders have already been written for you. So if you wanted to add a shader, all you'd really have the option of doing is modifying one of the existing shaders and then tweaking it. So you'd say, for example, if you're wanting a cube mapped shader on an animating object, you'd use the character underscore basic.fx file, cut and paste it so it's called, my new shader underscore basic.fx, go in there and then add the gubbins for cube mapping, which of course implies that you need some experience in writing shaders, which is not everyone's cup of tea. but that's the current way of doing it. Just dropping in a shader randomly found from the internet is almost entirely never going to work with Game Guru, because Game Guru needs to do lots of other things, like it has to work out a separate render pass for drawing into the depth, because it's got a sort of a gbuffer post-process thing going on, and also things like shadows. It needs to calculate values passed from the vertex shader to the pixel shader, so the shadows can render properly in when you're on the highest shader settings. So there's all those things to consider, and a random shader out there on the internet wouldn't have those things. You could use them and then they're in Game Guru, but half the sliders wouldn't actually work, so but then you could have your custom shader. So really that would be the compromise if we went ahead and allowed specifying custom shaders from within the IDE. So maybe that's a discussion we can have. So yeah, in lieu of more clarification on what exactly are you missing to go from A to B, considering I can see B right there, it's in Game Guru, it's being rendered, I will go with this one. And we'll cover the version 1.131 differences maybe towards the end of this broadcast, or maybe next week when it's already been out for 5 days or more, and then people can tune in and see if there's anything that they've missed. And after the broadcast, you can go straight out and get that update, see, so you can play with all the toys. So it might be an idea to do that next week. But before I go plumbing off into Ace Rimmer's suggestion, I'm just going to go to the chat board and see if there's any questions that trump this suggestion, or a huge round of no, don't do that, do this. And lots of hellos. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, half a page of hellos. And we've got Bud of the Rings. He's been able to work and watch at the same time. Excellent multitasking there. Has the stream started? I do not see anything. I've just checked. Everything seems to be right. Everything's broadcasting great. So maybe you need to switch browsers. Yes, it has. Are you hearing Lee talk? So hopefully you can get me. It might take a minute because there's a lot of buffering going on, and then it's stored up, and then it's streamed out to you based on the speed of your broadband. So you might have to wait like a whole minute from the start of the hour. So lots of chat about how you could switch browsers and clear caches and stuff like that. So looks like help is being provided, so means I don't have to. So I think we'll go on with Ace Rimmer's suggestion, sliders. So we'll cut it up into 3 main chunks. A brief introduction to sliders and what they are and what they do. Then we'll go into the idea of real-time lighting versus baked lighting through the light mapping process. And then finally, writing scripts that can change those slider values inside your game, which becomes very, very cool sometimes. And let's see how long that takes. And of course, anyone joining us in live world, please do post your questions. I keep glancing across. They can be relevant to this. They can be completely random questions about Game Guru, or any question you like. It's absolutely fine. So I'm not going to run through Steam. I'm going to run B7. Currently I'm on beta 7. This is my internal version. I had to sort of, last 10 minutes before the broadcast, I had to scramble and undo some debugging stuff. It seems now that very, very, very large levels are doing something naughty in the LUA subsystem and causing an error. So we really do need to solve that before the whole update goes out, which explains and justifies the delay. So sliders. Okay, well I think what we'll do, just to impress those who maybe not have seen Game Guru before or many times, this is a pre-made level. Wouldn't call it a game, it's really just one level, and were you to have 20 such levels, then you could possibly call it a game with more of an elaborate story. This is really just to demonstrate things you can do in Game Guru. But I've picked it because it means I don't have to create a scene full of content and then go on to sliders, because that probably take 10 minutes. So we're just going to sort of skip ahead. Let's pretend we created a level, we dropped lots of things in, we set up some logic, and we've played our game. But now we actually want to ding, 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 ding. It was a bit slow. I wonder if I've actually compiled it under debug. That would be naughty. Yeah, AI's gone absolutely nutsoid, which tells me it's probably running the debug version. That's fine, that's no problem. Because what we can do is come out of there, we can go into Steam, go to my library, Game Guru Beta, which is not Beta 7, it's Beta 6. So Beta 7 is very much a work in progress, so feel privileged that I don't send you every update that goes through my little workshop. So we'll try this again, shall we? So we'll go into tutorials, play games, the Big Escape. And the hope is at some point, once the community on aggregate agree that it plays good, the AI is good, it's looking good, it plays fast, then we're going to wrap this level up into an executable and put it on the website so people can just check it out. I think that would be a smart move. So it's getting there. I mean, every time we play around with it, it gets faster, or it looks a bit better, or the AI gets a bit stronger. But I think we've got a way to go yet. I'm in no rush to do that standalone executable thing. Now, it's still chuggy slow. That's probably because I'm on broadcast, but yeah, this looks fine. Okay, so just to go for maximum impressiveness, I'm going to knock all my shaders up to maximum. Yes, indeed. So yeah, how did I get that menu? Well, you tab and then tab again, and the secondary tab screen is all your sliders. These are the things you can modify. Now, just before I launch into all that, you may notice, I don't know, maybe the Twitch broadcast quality is not there, but the issue that I want to fix before I release version 1.131 is you can see the shimmering on the grass. So essentially what happens is when geometry moves, it seems to randomize the scalable ambient obscurance shading, you know, the bit that makes corners and cracks within your scene darker than one that's fully exposed to sunlight. Well, it seems by moving that polygon a little bit, it really causes a big jump in that random value. And what I really want to do is retain the same random setting, like you can imagine it as a random seed value. Keep that seed value the same for small movements. You'll notice if I just tab off, you can see the gun and the hand, and there's a little flickering around the fingers. They're very small movements. I mean, SAO is really only best for like static stuff. So what I'm going to do is have some sort of a temporal delta detector, and anything, and then basically the randomization is multiplied by sort of that delta with a bit of bias applied, and hopefully it won't shimmer all, you know, it won't change the random pattern just because it's moved 0.001 in world space. And in fingers crossed, hopefully that will solve it. So that's my plan, which means of course then all that grass won't shimmer. So, and for those who don't know what SAO is, and it's a relatively new introduction, if you actually look at, knock it up a little bit more, if you look at the ground where it meets that concrete slab, if I switch off SAO, that's what you got at the moment with version 1.13. You see, it's basically quite diffuse, no real sense of, you know, that's looking up and that's looking sideways, but there's no real indicator with the lighting. If we put SAO on, you can see right away, you've now got a real appreciation that that little groove where the floor meets that concrete, not getting much light, you see, because it's only it's stuck in there. So you can off, on, off, on, and it also applies to any geometry rendered in the scene. That includes guns, the grass, anything in the air, everything, characters, guns. It's cool. So what the sliders do essentially is allow you to disagree with my choice or the level designer's choice, if you're talking about a sample level, and choose your own.
Hey buddy, you ready to blow this joint?
I certainly am.
I can't help you with those guards, but if you can get to the extraction point, I'll pick you up from there.
Oh, cool.
Me versus an undetermined number of bad guys? What could go wrong?
So this was a nicely lit, you know, it was done by an artist who has an eye for good level design and also wanted to create a bit of atmosphere. And what you may not see, but there's actually a bit of fog as it goes off into the distance. If we switch that fog intensity off, so it looks different, you know. And these are little subtle things that will differentiate your game and your visuals from the next person's game. It would be so easy, wouldn't it, if you just drop stuff in and then that was that. but you need control. You need to be able to customize it. Let's say I wanted it to be sort of really spooky and scary. You'd ramp in fog intensity up to 100. You'd make it more of a whitish sort of fog, and then you bring it in. So on a very foggy day, and that means you can have zombies jumping out from behind things and scaring you. You don't like white. What if it was black fog? But of course, black fog, it could be night time. But the thing is, the sky gives it away. Fortunately, you can change pretty much anything in the tab area. So we'll change the sky to dark. So you've got starry sky, and now it's dark. Now you can play at night. But if you want to play around even more, then everybody knows that moonlight sort of has a certain colouring to it. So let's say we play around with the light calculation by reducing the red and the green on the surface. That leaves blue, and now you've got a nice bluey colour, but only from the direct light. Imagine there was a moon in the light direction, that would be that. But then you've also got this ambience. If we knock ambience off completely and then move a little bit up, and then again give an influence of blue, so increase the ambience level like that, then it's almost as if you've got a bit of indirect lighting going on in the scene. Now I must warn you that playing with the sliders has an infinite combination of ways to mess it up. It's really just a case of, buyer beware, and either stick to the defaults or know kind of what you're doing. So having a little bit of ambience, a lot more surface colour, make the fog not so hiding all your wonderful game because you can't see beyond the nose on your face. You've got on the highest shader settings, you've got some nice options to change the specular tone. So when you get like shiny grass, this gun would show it really. I think. Or is it just so it is. So no specular at all, but as you increase specular, not the shininess of the gun gets intensified, and so on and so forth. So you can do fog, you can do ambience and surface. So ambience is colour overall. If we wrapped that up to 100, doesn't matter if you've got any direct light, it's going to actually add all the light from every direction to every pixel in the scene. So that's ambience. But surface light is only the light from the direction of the sun or the moon. So it's basically this sharp, strong light, as if someone's just put a halogen up there, and that's sort of what you get. But I quite like that. That's quite stark, so I like that. And there's other things you can do. What if you wanted to raise the overall post-process brightness of the scene, and then increase the contrast to create more of a, and take that sharpness to yet another level. So you can see this is really quite, sore on the eyes, but I like it enough to kind of keep it around. And I think that's it for the visual settings sliders. You've also got other ones here. I rather like the Vignette Effect. So let's say you get intensity of 100 and you increase the radius. You notice the around the outside of the scene, you've actually got sort of a darkening around the edge of the screen. If you actually switch that off, it's on, off, on, and these subtle little cinematic effects that just add to the visibility, the believability of the visuals you'll be seeing. You've also got motion blur. If I took motion up to some ridiculous degree and bring it right in front of me, you might be able to see that in Twitch land, making me a little bit dizzy. But motion blur is really great if you're sort of in a lower FPS. Motion blur can accommodate that lower performance, but at the same time give you a smoother experience. Depth of field can be fun. So there you go. It's basically I put the depth of field right up in front of my nose, and then made it maximum intensity. See that bridge now is blurred. That rock up there in the distance is blurred, but as we move the depth of field distance further away from us, it'll just blur stuff more in the distance. We'll just do a little bit of blur. Try and get it subtle. Light rays, if there's a light up there somewhere, usually from the sun, then the light rays can control that. And then this new one is the SAO intensity and radius. Now, I'm not super happy with the radius of the ambient obscurance yet. I've seen some techniques that could like do 55-60 samples per pixel, and then the radius projecting out quite a way. So objects are being subtly influenced by other objects that might like be a foot away or 2 foot away. Right now, it only works to say about 3 inches, you know, 0 to 3 inches. So the radius controls, so I can get you a shot of some SAO that is unequivocal. That's a word. There you go. We'll go back to that shot we saw before. So like I said before, it's kind of off and on. You see, but we can decrease the intensity to just switch it off that way, or you can decrease the radius, which sharpens it up a bit before it disappears. Remember, the same number of samples in a smaller amount of space, you basically get a lot more opportunity for darkening. But as the radius gets bigger and it goes out to try and find more light, it invariably does find more light, and so the effect of that that visual kind of diminishes, you see. So what I really want to do is when you ramp up radius, it internally ramps up the samples as well. So you really are just changing a slider in order to capture more influence from the area, rather than also having to play around with the intensity just to keep the colour of that effect the same. But I usually ramp them both at 50%, just so if you don't like it, you put it that way. If you do like it, put it up that way. But just to get a little bit of a subtle hint. There's other sliders that I won't really go into because they're not really relevant to lighting, and I think the objective of the question was to have a conversation about lighting and the options that are available. So that's the sliders. Now I'm not going to light map that scene. It will take a long time for anyone who's played around with a light mapper. So what I'm going to do is start a new map. I'm going to light something really easily, like this building, and maybe we'll get something that we saw before, maybe from the cityscape. Those girders were pretty cool, so we'll have 1, 2, 6 of these. And what else was pretty cool? These big blocks, those are quite cool as well, so we'll have 2 of those. And my favourite is these supply drop. I'll have one of them, and we'll have the other kind. And we'll have a star marker so we know where we start the game. And like I say, save early, save often. And now we're going to run it. So by default, when you create a new level, there is no light mapping. It doesn't assume you want it light mapped and then take a long time to do that. It goes in real time. This is real time rendering. Every lighting effect you see right now is all done in real time. And there is a performance penalty for having all your real time on and all your settings set to highest. So I've got maximum shadow. Now I bet you're thinking maximum shadow, but look, it's actually quite a subtle shadow. Why is that? It's because there's an ambient contribution, you see. If you took ambience to 0, there's nearly no contribution left. So you just get that solid shadow, but then you can still, you know, get rid of the shadow or put it back, stuff like that. So ambience does have a role to play, not only in real time, but also in the ambient, in the light mapping role as well, when it does calculate its light. So we'll stick shadows to out there. So you can see you've got shadows, you've got the SAO, you've got direct lighting, so it's actually light on that side and darker on that side. This is all the real-time stuff. You've got real-time shadows, and all of these so far, I think, yes, all of them are static. They're all static entities. And what I want to show you before I go and do a light map is the difference between that and a dynamic one. So I'm going to get a barrel, a red barrel, and just pop that down, maybe 1 in shadow and then 1 out of shadow. Run the game again after saving it. Because if you think about it, why would you cast all your shadows that are from static entities in real time? I mean, they're never going to move, so what's the point? It's just a waste of time. So you see there's nice shadows being cast there, and also there, but again, quite subtle. And so now what we're going to do is light map. Now, light mapping is function keys F1 through F4. Now, F4 is the ambient occlusion in the light mapper. But if you think about it, we now already have ambient occlusion in the post-process shader in real time. So we don't really never need to press F4. So just press F3, and that'll get the light mapper started. And I'm not giving up on the F4 ambient occluder. ambient occlusion. I think for that one, what we could probably do is that the ray casting style of ambient occlusion for some really good indirect light sampling. And you know, it'll take a long time to burn, but it should have some really, truly awesome looking scenes. So now what's happened is anything that was static, it's now baked them into a texture. And now it's actually using a texture instead of a real-time light. So that shadow now, that's a baked texture. That shadow there, that's a baked texture. And you still get your direct lighting on that side, so this is lighter, and this is darker. But look, even the shadow is now baked into a texture. Now I bet you're wondering, well, that's like a lower quality shadow than the one in real time, and that's because the texture that it had, the size of the texture they had was a fixed size. It's specified somewhere else. And it has to then stretch that texture across the whole of this building. Not just this wall, the entire building. All has to hold the light mapping texture for it. So as you can imagine, on a very large object, respectively the quality of your light mapping in your texture gets smaller because it has to more to go around. There's a solution to that which I'm going to show you, because that light mapping was pretty quick. But before I do that, the difference between that and that is this is dynamic. So I wish I could make that barrel a bit lighter, and thanks to version 1.131 you can now do this. So what we're going to do is change the weights to like 2 and friction to 50. So now it's going to be slidey, and very light. And I don't want it explodable. I just realised I might want to move it with a gun. So I'm going to apply changes so it doesn't blow up anymore. I'm going to go to my start marker, and I'm going to give myself a gun. This should be allowing me to move it. The player isn't really supposed to push objects around, although you can do if you play around with the weights long enough. So if I just pick Colt 1911, give myself some ammo, save those changes and go. You'll see that the barrel shaders are still dynamic, even though you've just light mapped the entire scene. And there has been requests that can you not specify a region and just light map just the region. That I think that's a pretty cool idea, because it means you can do very quick light maps. So, well, yeah, with a weight of 2, it's like as heavy as a sugar cube. So you can imagine you can really bang that thing out. But you can see that you know, friction's making it slide along, and the shadow's moving with it. So there you go. You've actually got full control over weight and friction now for every dynamic object in your scene. So, as a sort of a test case, if we just look at 2 things. The shadows cast from this sort of outcrop of wood, and also the shadows on that. See? So those are the 2 things we'll focus on. Again, we'll save. A bit paranoid there. Come out of here. Go into my Steam folder. Go into the setup.ini. If you scroll down, you'll find a nice chunk of settings. These are just fixed. You know, we've set them so it's a nice compromise between low-end systems and medium-end systems, and it kind of works for everybody. If you've got a nice big rig and you want to practice with sort of a higher quality result, you can certainly do that. So we've got light map quality of 500, blur level of 100. This is the one we want. Size. Now there's 2 different sizes. There's one for the terrain. You imagine large objects have less quality shadows. The terrain's the biggest thing ever, so we needed as big as we could get. You can go to 4196, but some of the older cards don't support that. But most, if not all of them, now support 2048, which is why that was set the maximum. If we set that to 2048, that is going to give every entity the opportunity to have a huge texture for its light mapping, and we'll see the result of that. We can come back and play with quality, but I want to show you one field at a time, and if we've time. So we go back into Steam and launch Beta 6. We should be able to load back in the level, and then relight map with F3, and then you should be able to see the improved shadows. So I'm just going to glance over to the chat. It's pretty busy, so hopefully I've got a worthy question kind of relating to this. Dink dink dink, bang bang bang. Surface, not sure. Right, surface level slider control, static lights, brightness, but also brightens the guns sometimes too much. Any chance of separate slider for gun brightness later? Yeah, brilliant idea. I was thinking that myself. And also per entity specular control, and per, you know, and also separate specular control for the gun as well, because you might want to change that. Right now you've got one slider, global specular setting. It's a bit mad. Now that's not to say Game Gear is terrible. You can actually go into the specular texture and then modify that. But you have to be a bit of an artist. You have to know how to create a texture, or at least modify one and save it back out in the right format. Not everyone can or wants to do that. So more sliders, yes. But as you saw on the screen, we're kind of running out of real estate. And I am trying to keep it so it's an 800, 600 friendly layout. So let's just scroll to the bottom whilst we are on the chatties. Sorry, just managed to log on, blah, blah, blah. Any progress on the building editor? We're still in the design phase, absolute design phase, and not rushing into it, and I'm not just copying off FPS Creator Classic and sticking that right in the middle. We have an opportunity, people, to create a really good building editor. I'm not going to spend a million years on it, but I'm going to play around with a couple of building editor tools and then assemble together what would be a really good, you know, the top 5 brilliant ideas, and then those will get implemented in prototype, and then I'll start showing on my blog my progress, and then you can feedback on whether you like it or not. So nearly there. We're going to, after this release, there's a little bit of housework, and then bang, straight onto the implementation of the prototype with what I've learned so far. And I'm erring on the side of a lot of control. So rather than just, you know, just dragging one thing in and saying that's your building, lots of control over what building you can make. So it should be exciting to work on, and exciting for you to use when it eventually gets released. Sometimes first load GG plus and minus for brush size are reversed. Also sometimes hotkeys don't work at all. Yeah, plus and minus can be reversed on some keyboards because we're basing our detection on hardware, on keyboard hardware values. But they sometimes reversed. Now that's very confusing. So unless you've actually got 2 different computers, 2 different keyboards, or 2 different language selectors on your OS, maybe that's why. So email me directly at lee@thegamecreators.com. I'd like to find out, you know, what keyboard you've got, what scenario you're using, and when it's toggling. You can remap keys. We've actually added support, so you can actually map any of your keys to any function within the editor. So if I press F1, oh, doop-a-doop, F1, you get all the keys, and you can remap all them keys to whatever you want. I mean, it won't change the letters here, but you can actually remap them based on your keyboard. So you'd be pleased to hear that. So I'm going to run the game. Just reading the last couple of statements. Yeah, just fellow chatters providing advice on keyboards, whether it's a quality laptop or not. If I exit GG and reload, it sometimes fixes it. Yeah, well, that's good. That means you can reproduce it and you can solve it in the short term. But being able to reproduce it and then also revealing its solution will help me find and fix that bug. So we should get talking. And on the chat, my email has been posted, lee@thegamecreators.com. So yes, please avail yourself of that feature and that assistance. Now I'm going to press F3 again. What happens is if you've already light mapped the scene and you light map again, it throws the old light map out and it starts all the way from scratch. It's kind of what you want. So let's see what we get. We should have a nicer shadow. If we don't, we probably have to play with that quality value to sort of prompt the light mapper to do more. But I'm pretty hopeful. The texture size really is the one that's squashing it down a lot. So yeah, look at that, so much better. Now the straps actually have these great shadows that, I mean, don't get too close, but say from this distance, that's great. That's a fine shadow, and it works for everything. Every single entity now has access to these amazing high def shadows. And again here, and you would argue, and I would actually say, these are now better shadows than the real time ones. Whereas you get this close with a real-time shadow, you get a bit of sort of a checkered effect. Now that's just temporary. I'm going to solve that. That's a bit. There's some techniques I've been researching which can, when you're that close to a shadow, it uses what's called a high def shadow map. which it fades in. So when you get closer to something, it uses this real high intensity shadow technique, but only in a very small area, i.e. the area that's immediately in front of your nose. You don't need to use it in the distance, you see, so you can sort of bring it in. A little bit of a performance hit, but I don't think it would be huge, because we're already doing that performance on the shadows. So it just might be like, you know, 0.001 of an FPS rate. And then it extends. I mean, all the shadows that we sort of sort out, those are looking nice, but when you look around, like the shadows on the window frames, that's been sort of reflecting the direction of where the light's coming from. The shadows being cast from that plank up there. The shadows being cast from, you see the little girder and it sticks out. There's a little shadow in there. That's a nice quality shadow cast like that. And all in the highest. So that is an introduction to the difference between dynamic lights and light mapping, and you know how to actually improve that. But what you find is when you've ramped it up from 512 by 512 light map texture to one that's 2000 by 2000, there's two penalties. One, your standalone executable when you save it will be bigger because the light maps are now bigger because they hold more information about shadows. And two, there's more video memory used. So if you're hoping to run your game on a 512 meg video card, it will still do it, but it will crunch them down. So it's kind of good, but you know, if you don't really have an audience with those high-end graphics cards, then yeah, just use our defaults that we've provided you. Now some might argue, why don't you just leave that on as default, because giving people those blurry lower res shadows isn't doing the reputation of Game Guru any good, and on many levels I would agree with you. But we spent so much time making sure that the low-end users got a fair bite at the cherry, you know, so you could actually run it on a laptop with a decent integrated graphics chip and a gameplay that runs at 30 frames per second. So just ramping it all back up for quality again just seems a little bit undoing a little bit of what we've done. So that's light mapping, and what you can do is you can toggle between the two now. So let's stir at this thing and we switch from pre-bake to real time. So increase the intensity a bit there and drop down ambience. So you can see a different, try and get the comparison good. And then pre-bake and then real time. So in terms of the dynamic casting of the shadow, the light mapping one is better. Now there was a question about performance. So we're currently on the light mapper one. I'm not going to move the thing. I'm just going to press tab. Actually, there is a flag that I've changed where we're going to have to switch it off. So we'll save what we've done. When you save a level, it also saves the light mapping that you did. So you don't have to light map every time you launch your project and carry on working on your game. You basically get that saved with the level, which is very useful, especially if your level's massive and it takes 4 hours to light map. I changed a flag to lock to the VSync. Here is VSync 1. So it'll always be 60 FPS. I did that because you don't really need more frame rate than the monitor refresh that you're on, and my monitor refresh is 60. And so by setting VSync to 1, it just matches the monitor's refresh, so there's no tear lines, and you get, you know, the game isn't any slower or faster, it's just a nice smoother render. I'll set that to 0, I ignore the monitor's refresh completely, and I can just get a big massive FPS number, which is what we need to actually work out performance metrics between a light map scene and a non-light map scene. Just glancing at the chat. Allied characters, question mark, when, question mark, it would add a whole new dimension to games. Did you know that with a powerful scripting system you can actually write your own AI for allies? I'm surprised no one's actually done it. Or if they have, you know, it's not come to my attention. But yeah, you could just take a cracked character, go into its script, rip out all the enemy stuff, and then rewrite it as so the character's following you around, it's shooting at the targets you shoot at. You know, you could do it all in there. I mean, it's really pretty advanced stuff, to be sure. But you can actually do it right now. I guess your question is, when can I just drop in a character and set him to friend? After the EBE, after the Easy Building Editor, the next thing on the voting board is AI. Now it says things like going upstairs and enemies on roofs. I'm taking the opportunity to really overhaul all of the AI system, make the combat better, more challenging, allies, you know, scripted behaviours like characters that can run into a building and start sniping through a window, stuff like that. I think that's the opportunity, and it's been, people have been waiting for it for quite a long time, and I don't really want to prolong it any more than I have to, but I had to do it at the right time. There's a voting system in place to make sure that we're always working on what the majority wants us to work on. It creates a few problems. I think it solves more problems than it creates. So that's the pre-bake. Once you remembered it was pre-bake, we go to real time. So we start with pre-bake. We're running at a 240 frames per second on pre-bake. If we go to real time without moving the camera anywhere, we're now running at 232. So the pre-bake was faster by 7 FPS on the assumption you're running at about 240 FPS. So it's a very, very small, almost unnoticeable improvement in performance. And of course that will change. The more dynamic stuff you put in and the more dynamic shaders, shadows would have to be rendered. So what I mean by that is if currently got just a splattering of static. If I did another 200 buildings that all was rendered in real time and all had to cast real shadows, that would hit the performance on the real time lighting. The same 200 buildings with a pre-baked scene, you don't have to do any shadows. All you do is just regurgitate the texture you pre-calculated earlier. It's going to be faster. So that's really the performance characteristics of those two modes. So I'm just looking at the clock. I think we've probably got time to go to the last bit I promised, which was how do you change these sliders but in your game? You know, how do we get that magic happening? Well, we'll do two things. First what we're going to do is drop down a trigger zone. That allows us to, when we walk into it, let's say we walk between these two blocks, we can trigger our behaviour, whatever that behaviour is going to be. And we'll save the level, because now we're going to go into the magical land of scripts. So script bank, you've got global, got LUA. That's the one you pretty much always have open. Let's just not confuse ourselves. I'll get rid of my change log and me playing around with my developer post-process shader. Go to the bottom, and all the commands, all the LUA commands that we've got in their entirety, they're documented here at the bottom. So these ones are, you know, you can control flashlight, you can hard code the occlusion vectors. We've got some really cool commands coming in 1.131 for global sound effects. A lot of people have been requesting that. Whole bank of sprite and image commands. Lots of direct access entity commands, so you can go straight to the entity and play around with that. You can even get the terrain height now from any coordinate on the world. Little things like that keep popping up, so keep an eye out at the bottom of this. But the slider modifiers, they was done quite a while ago, so they'll be further up this list. The reason I'm scrolling through is I actually can't remember what the names are. Once you get into the hundreds of commands, you really can't put them all in your head in one go. I think I found it. Here we are. You can set fog nearest and far and near distances. So you can move the fog in, move the fog out. In fact, that might be what we do, because that sounds pretty cool. You can set the fog colour in real time inside the game. Set the intensity, ambience and surface, those can be changed. You can change the post-processed vignette effect. So let's say you're doing a cutscene, you can bring the vignette in like big for look cinematic, and then when the little, you know, the sequence is finished, vignette disappears. Carry on. You can also control motion blur, situations where you don't want to use it. Same with depth of field, and that's it. So basically everything in the visual settings panel you can do as a real time, and I'm going to show you the fog one. So because that's kind of easy to do. So there's two ways you can do it. You can bring the fog distance in, or you can set your perfect fog distance in the test game, and then you change the intensity, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to say you've got fog right in there. It's fully intense. It's white fog. maybe a bit of blue, and go to real time so we get better. I think there was a bug there with the pre-bake fog, so I'll actually make a note of that after this call. But you'll notice the SAO effect is there, but now it actually gets rid of the SAO effect if fog's taken over. We'll bring the fog in even more. Okay, so there you go. So that's, let's say, the normal game. But then when you go between these two things, the click is just the script that's by default attached to a trigger zone. We can get rid of that sound. But when we go in, we want the fog to fade away as if you've entered like another realm. You come through these gates and then the fog goes away slowly. So that's what we're going to create now. So I'm going to start with an existing... No, actually I won't start with that. What I'm going to start with is the player in zone, because that's the one for zones. So PLR in zone, player in zone, change it. So we'll call it something like lift fog. Remember to copy your file name, not list fog. Copy that. Find it again, L. Open it up. Change your function names to match the file name. So this, when you're in the zone, don't play sound anymore, that's silly. Don't destroy it, we're going to keep running whatever's inside here. So what we're going to do inside here? Well, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to have a global called fade, which I'll reset to 100. And then once I'm in the zone, I want to deduct that. But I only want to deduct it until it gets to 0. So whilst it's greater than 0, deduct it by 1 each game cycle. So it'll go 99, 98, 97, blah, 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 3, 2, 1, 0, and then it'll stay at 0. So maybe some of you can sort of see where I'm going with this. I'm going to use this value to control the intensity of the fog. And as I've already forgotten, I'm going to go back to global.lua, set fog intensity. It's a single value. Doesn't really say what V does. Is it 0 to 1? Is it a float? Is it a percentage? I'm going to guess it's a percentage. But trial and error is your best friend when Lee isn't documenting the LUA commands quite as fast as adding LUA commands. Set fog intensity. But there is an if you look at the bottom, all the new commands I add now, I do document them. I tell you what the parameters do, what the values are needed. You know, it's just these older ones haven't been documented in this file. They're documented somewhere else. In the LUA advice thing you can get from the IDE, which I can show you now. Help, LUA scripting advice. Just click that and you get a lot more information about the commands. In case you was interested. So there's the command. It's going to start at 100 and go down to 0, right? That should be cool. Save. Then the last thing you've got to do is associate this trigger zone with that script we've just made, which I believe we call lift fog. Apply the changes. Save what you've done. Run the game. Dun, 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 dun. So now if we run through here, I should probably save it on that, it should move the intensity of the fog away. So there you go. Now maybe you wanted it sort of slower and more subtle than that. Well, what you can do with a bit of jiggery pokery is instead of 100, set it to 1000. When you're passing in that value, divide it by 10. So remember, it's you want it 0 to 100. But let's say you only want it to fade out a little bit, so leave 25% of the fog alone. So you've always got a bit of fog. So now when we run, it will actually reload all the scripts. So it will load our changes into our game, and then we'll run between the posts. Well, that's interesting. Yeah. When you're in a test game and the fog intensity is changed in the game, but then you come out and save that level, the new intensity value applies. See, it went to 0, and so that's what it is. It's, you know, it remembers that value. Maybe there's an option here where we can say restore these, so the LUA commands only change when you're playing, but when you go back to this slider, it still says 100. But then you've got some confusion here, so we're going to have to figure out which way to go. But right now, it's honest and simple. You can change the slider yourself, or those scripts can do it for you. In fact, if I leave that on and run forward, Does it actually change the slider? No, it doesn't. You have to come back in and click that. Yeah, I think you can. It only does it in the background. So again, if we go into here, that's quite fast, isn't it? It might be fast because that wasn't set back to 100, wasn't it? Okay, so if you come out of the zone, we want to do the reverse, don't we? So else, you're out of the zone, but it's less than 100, or in our case 1,000. And remember that 25 now has to be 250 because the variable's dealing on a scale of magnification of 10. We want to increase the fog. Stop 1,000 divided 1,000 by 10, you get 100. That should be a percentage. So run the game and see what happens. So I'm just going to check for some last minute questions. I'm just looking at the clock. We've probably got 7 more minutes. AI needs a lot of TLC. 110% agree. Absolutely, we're going to go there and we're going to do something about it in a big way. Thanks, Lee. Going for my dinner. That's fine. Lots of buys. Thanks. Never noticed. An option to grab the current value would be most useful, so you can restore it afterwards. You could just store the value in an array. Why does Story Zone continue to play video while the game plays? Seems unfair to the player. You can actually stop the video, I think. I think there is a script command to stop it. I think the sound carries on and that's a bug, but I think the video can be stopped anytime you want. You can just kill it immediately. Retro Game Bloke says there is no command to get the value of that intensity. So you set it in the editor, but there's just no way to kind of keep track of that. Yeah, that's absolutely right. We're going to need another command, aren't we? Get fog intensity as well as set. So if you just excuse me a minute, that is a, you know, there's certain things that are like nice to haves and optional extras and stuff, and then sometimes it is absolutely super core critical. So get fog intensity as new command plus all others. That's going to go into 131. I regard that as super core request, so that's going in. So now fades out, and then now I'm out of the zone, it should fade back in. And if you're working on scripts, always a good idea to do some debugging. So we're going to see what's going on with our lovely little variable, and we're going to track it by prompting it onto the screen, so we'll be able to render the number. And I always look at my chat sometimes because when people are watching the broadcast and they see that I've made a bug, they're usually posting the solution. I only see the solution after I figured it out myself. So 1,000 scrolls down. Yeah, you can see that fog slowly fade out to 250, and it fades back in and then out again. I think I've just figured out what the V is. V is 256. It's the RGB. It's the 8-bit value that you're setting. I'm pretty sure of it. Yeah, because it could be. In which case, if you divide it by, if that was 100, you'd have to divide it by 5 to make it 200. Yeah. So we'll see what happens. And also, if you think about it, you don't have to put them in there. Put them out here. But be aware that every command you call in script is hitting your performance. Ever so minusculely, but it's definitely doing it. And if you've got 100 scripts all doing the same sorts of many commands, don't be too surprised if you wonder where your performance has leaked off to. So, should really save that, and then go in. And then it fades out. And then we come out of it again. The fog comes back. And of course, because we have control of the scripts, we can increase 1 to say 10. You know, it defeats the whole idea of dividing it by 10 in the last part. But my idea was that the fog thing happened really quick, so you saw what was going on. So the V is 0 to 255. In case you're interested, so we zoom in. So that's out and in, out and in. And that's the third part of the request on how you do the sliders, light mapping versus real time, and the performance implications, and using a script to control those sliders in game. So hopefully that was a thorough answer to your query. Just looking down the last post, This is Man Alive 2000. I have a high game carrying on in standby video playing in Story Zone. If you're thinking it's a bug, just post it to me. In fact, email it lee@thegamecritic.com. It could be a really like a 5-minute fix. So, but when you do post the bug, give me a nice step-by-step, you know, everything I should add to a level, the order in which I do it, what I should click, what I should press, what I should run, do I make a standalone, how do I play that standalone, as much information as you can think of. That way I can reproduce it quickly and fix it even quicker. So we'll get rid of the fog now. I think I like it without fog. Fog intensity of 0. Yes, we don't take that off. Yeah, I think that, I know why. The the fog is permanently now controlled by the script, which is this command here. So what you would do, you'd say delete that, and next time you run the game, you've now got full control of the fog intensity again. Dump, 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 and we can knock fog intensity off, and we're back where we was. Maybe brighten up the scene a bit, like so. Keep that strength of shadow. And you will have noticed as well that in addition to the, you know, high quality shadows and the strong shadows and be able to control them a little bit, you also get the now SAO effect, which if you look at that crate, sort of see where the crates are sitting on the plank, on the wooden plank. Have a study at that for a bit. Now as I switch off bloom, you see it adds all them subtle little lighting shadowy plays that you just wouldn't get with just a strict light map process, which of course can be intensified a little bit, but not too much. So this, let's call this SAO version 1 implementation. There's more things I can do about temporal shifting, and maybe a bigger radius and more intensity, and maybe a finer grain or different randomization noise functions. Lots of things we can do, but I think this is a pretty good version 1. So look forward to that in version 1.131. And it looks like we have just about run out of time, so there will be no walkthrough of the version 131 features. That will probably now be next week when it's already out on Steam. So by the time you finish watching the broadcast, you can go straight in and start playing with all the new toys. So look forward to that. That should be pretty awesome. I think it's going to be next Wednesday, the next broadcast. I'm pretty sure I've got no meetings next week. So it will be Wednesday as normal. But it was great to see so many people figure out it was Thursday and then join us today. So thanks for all the extra traffic. Much appreciated. So I hope this video was useful, informative, and gave you ideas. And please feel free to post more requests in that forum you saw, and I'll read it next week. So until then, Wednesday at 4 PM BST, I shall bid you adieu and goodbye.